if you're over 60, we'll give you the vaccine. We'll give you proof that you got round 1. We'll tell you what kind to get round 2. Come back in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And self-select, please. If you're healthy and you're under 60, don't come. If you're under 60, you've got a comorbidity, come on in. And if you're over 80, get somebody to drive you, and we'll vaccine them as well. Honestly, self-selection is the best way to go. All this bureaucracy, what a nightmare. Now, Ron DeSantis gives a press conference yesterday. I want to play you the first part of it. He is talking about big tech and Florida, cut number 13.
A number of our great legislative leaders, as well as the Lieutenant Governor. I want to thank Speaker Chris Sprowls and President Wilton Simpson for all that they're doing, as well as Representative Blaise Ngolia and Senator Danny Burgess. So thank you all for being here. Floridians should have the privacy of their data and personal information protected. Their ability to access and participate in online platforms protected, and their ability to participate in elections free from interference from big tech protected. What began as a group of upstart technology companies from the West Coast has since transformed into an industry of monopoly communications platforms that monitor, influence, and control the flow of information in our country and among our citizens, and they do that to an extent hitherto unimaginable. At the turn of the 21st century, online technology represented tools to liberate Americans from reliance on distrusted legacy media outlets. As social media proliferated over the past decade, citizens could directly connect with large numbers of people and could cut out corporate media outlets entirely. Over the years, however, these platforms have changed from neutral platforms that provided Americans with the freedom to speak to enforcers of preferred narratives. Consequently, these platforms have played an increasingly decisive role in elections and have negatively impacted Americans who dissent from orthodoxies favored by the big tech cartel. Now, we have seen the power of their censorship over individuals and organizations, including what I believe is clear viewpoint discrimination. And as these companies have grown and their influence expanded, big tech has come to look more like Big Brother with each passing day. But this is 2021, not 1984, and this is real life, not George Orwell's fiction. These companies exert monopoly power over a centrally important forum of public discourse and the access of information that Floridians rely on. It used to be that consumers were trusted to make their own decisions about what information to consume, about which leaders to, quote, follow, about what news to watch. Now those decisions are increasingly made by nameless, faceless boards of censors. They even have a name, euphemistically called content moderators. And we're told that these are private companies and that those who disagree with their decisions to regulate content and even suppress content can simply choose other services. Well, when 2.8 million Americans chose to download the application Parler and share information with friends, family, and colleagues, what was the result of that? Canceled by Amazon, Google, and Apple. What about the 88 million Americans who chose to, quote, follow President Donald Trump? Sorry, content moderators on Twitter pulled the plug, as did a different set of, quote, moderators at Facebook. This is the case even though leaders like Ayatollah Khamenei have been permitted to use these platforms to do things like call for the destruction of Israel and the elimination of Jews. Core issue here is this: are consumers going to have the choice to consume the information they choose, or are oligarchs in Silicon Valley going to make those choices for us? No group of people should exercise such power, especially not tech billionaires in Northern California. Now, if I had to choose, I'd rather be governed by the first 50 names in the Tallahassee phone book than the CEOs of big tech companies. If you don't like Parler, then don't read it. Let's not have those choices made for us, or before long, we will have nothing more than someone else's choices imposed upon us by a bunch of monopolies whose core business is to sell advertising. These behaviors are concerning to me, as I know they are concerning to many Floridians. It's high time that we step up to the plate to ensure the protection of the people and their rights. And I'm committed to addressing what may be one of the most pervasive threats to American self-government in the 21st century, because I believe in individual rights, privacy rights, and property rights. because I trust Floridians to choose which content to consume and which to ignore, and because I want to preserve Florida's rich, diverse public discourse and not allow corporate-owned, narrative-approved outlets to dominate our voices. Now, fortunately, I'm not alone in this fight, and I'm glad to work with the Speaker of the House and other legislative leaders as we take on these issues on behalf of the people of Florida. As we work together, we're united under core beliefs in the sacredness of one's voice, one's privacy, and the protection they deserve in our system of government. Privacy rights are really property rights, and just like big tech can't rummage through your dresser drawers, they also aren't entitled to track your every move. You know, someone once summed it up to me this way: when I invite you into my house and say, have a seat, I don't mean you can leave with my couch. Our founding fathers were deliberate in the enshrinement of our rights in the Constitution to ensure that we, the people, were guaranteed protection against those wishing to violate our rights. Ironically, our early founders were most concerned with the tyranny of government in deciding these rights, but today, the big tech oligarchy has in many ways become a clearer and more present danger to the restriction of the right to free speech than the government itself. And certainly, if you go back and look at the monopolies at the turn of the 20th century, these current big tech monopolies are exerting power far more pervasive than Standard Oil ever did.
Stop it right there. We're going to come back. Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, has hit the bullseye. And I think you need to read The Age of Surveillance Capitalism to understand the ubiquity with which you are being tracked, and understand that when Ron DeSantis talks about this, he is far, far ahead of where the political class is. But where Americans are going is where Ron DeSantis is already at. Stay tuned.
Trending now here on the Dennis Prager Show.
It's symbolic of something that is happening even in America. We're fighting back against the left's destruction of whether it's Denmark or the United States. There is fight in us. I was told by someone very high up at PragerU, meeting with donors in Colorado, and his report to me was, these people are fighting. There was a fear that the election or non-election, but the assumption of the presidency by President Biden, by Joe Biden, would just knock the wind out of conservative sails. Au contraire, it has given impetus to conservative sails. There are too many of us who love this country and its values. So that's, I needed you to know that. That's the way that one works. Yep. By the way, whatever your position on the hedge fund issue, you can't deny there is fight going on. There is the Reddit people who, at the very least, what they did, and I'm not going to get into this in detail now, but what they did at the very least is show corruption in this company, Robinhood, which is a, what are they called, brokerage house? I mean, that to manipulate stocks that way, you can't undo the hedge fund's profits?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Ron DeSantis is a Republican, so therefore has to be portrayed as some kind of a yahoo. And Cuomo, who it was literally revealed yesterday, underreported COVID deaths in nursing homes by around 50%, he gets the victory lap. He gets the book deal. He gets the Emmy Award. These clowns, even when they're faced with horrific news, like the Attorney General in New York and her scathing report showing the disastrous response by Cuomo with his mandate that nursing homes must take COVID-19 infected people, which sent thousands and thousands of elderly people to their deaths? Well, here's CNN's take last night. Honest to goodness, this came down at like 8 o'clock at night. Headline by Chris Cillizza, CNN editor-at-large. Analysis. Andrew Cuomo's COVID-19 performance may have been less stellar than it seemed. May have been less stellar. They lied about how many people died in nursing homes because they were desperate to try to cover up Andrew Cuomo's botched response to COVID.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Burka.
Tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. Yes, the country with the largest military capabilities with nuclear weapons is now back to fighting the climate. Just as I explained to you on a prior program when I was asked to run an exercise.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I'm playing for you Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, giving a press conference yesterday about big tech and the threat that it presents to everyone. Let's pick up that tape.
These are so important because of big tech's pervasiveness and near limitless influence in our society. With billions of monthly users and the vastness of information exchange, not only do these companies control the flow of information, they are selling it as well. This is how you think the business works. They take consumer data, sell it for advertising, specifically more than $200 billion worth of advertising in a given year. And that's not really innovation. That's just a different form of Madison Avenue. Now, since its inception, big tech has experienced rapid and extraordinary growth. Its path to expansion bore a willingness to engage in a host of savvy practices to advance profit while compromising the protection of consumers. Not only do Floridians share with these platforms their lives, thoughts, hopes, and stories, but also some of their most intimate personal information. But what most folks don't realize is that all these companies are taking that information, regardless of its sensitivity, and selling it to whoever is willing to pay the highest price. They've even created complex markets and exchanges for the sale of Floridians' information, all the while claiming to never sell user information. Florida's not going to be tolerating that. Florida consumers deserve protection for their privacy. And with the help of our legislative partners, we're going to stand together in support of Floridians and put a stop to big tech's practice of preying on consumers. Your privacy is important. We also are going to address censorship and deplatforming. Now, these network of Silicon Valley CEOs wield extraordinary power to the point of holistically controlling the flow of vast swaths of information in our country. In a matter of hours, a business can be dismantled, a community of friends and colleagues canceled, and even a sitting president of the United States silenced. By their own admission, social media companies view themselves as a new public square and are happy to market themselves as platforms of global, regional, and local connectivity. Make no mistake, they are nothing more than advertising conglomerates, and I'm not interested in handing over the keys to the public square to a bunch of companies whose economic interests are not aligned with the public interest. When it comes to the rightful criticism for their editing and manipulation of the public square, big tech executives flee to shelter themselves from accountability as anything but a public forum, and that they have the chutzpah, the nerve, to insist on broad liability protection. Heads they win, tails we lose. And worse yet, a faceless and nameless group of tech employees at these companies now wield tremendous power to censor speech and enforce their viewpoint on political discourse upon the general public. If George Orwell had thought of it, he would have loved the term content moderation. Consequences of big tech censorship are felt far and wide. Take, for example, big tech's approach to censoring criticism of pseudo-scientific lockdowns during the coronavirus pandemic. Well, these lockdowns were almost universally rejected in pre-COVID pandemic preparedness plans. Lockdowns at the time of the pandemic were favored by the, quote, narrative. And so in the name of, quote, science, articles and posts warning against lockdowns were taken down and censored. The result has been the destruction of millions of lives across America, as well as increased deaths from suicide, substance abuse, and despair, without any corresponding benefit in COVID mortality. Shouldn't such monumental policy questions have received a full, open, and robust debate? Social media platforms have become among the most powerful mechanism for a private citizen to make his or her voice heard. It is incumbent upon us to ensure those voices are not capriciously and vindictively targeted.
All right, I want to stop that. You can go find the whole DeSantis presser. It is in the first place I have found the most comprehensive critique of all of Silicon Valley coming from the most powerful politician I have heard it come from. Now, Ron DeSantis is a Yale Law School grad, Navy intel officer who deployed with the SEALs. He's a smart guy, and he has their number. And so Google and Facebook, the word is out, friends. You are going to be regulated. In fact, you might be expropriated. And by that, I mean all that data that you've stored up, the government's coming for it. Just so you know. I'll be right back with Steve Kornacki. Stay tuned, America.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
You guys are not going to believe what is going on in Illinois right now. Shocking that I have to say that. It's that bad, you guys. It's beyond your wildest belief.
I'm only peripherally aware of this, so please go ahead.
So recently, the Illinois State Board of Education approved this new rule for statewide curriculum mandates called the Culturally Responsive Teaching and Leading Standards. And right now, it's pending before the Illinois General Assembly and will be voted on February 16th to put into all curriculum for K through 12 schools in Illinois. But essentially, it's a new law that forces teachers to, in their words, embrace and encourage progressive viewpoints and perspectives. That's, fancy buzzwords, but what does that actually mean? Essentially, teachers are mandated by law to discuss current political controversies in class. They have to organize what they call action civics, which are field trips, student protests, lobbying expeditions on behalf of causes like gun control or the Green New Deal. They have to admit that there's unlimited numbers of genders and prioritize representation in the classroom.
This is in a state legislative bill.
And they're doing everything they can to bring this to the national level and essentially implement it as part of Common Core for all public schools nationwide. This is in addition to critical race theory, which is already a problem in Chicago.
Oh, it's terrible.
If you guys aren't familiar with the 1619 Project from the New York Times, that's among the most woke curriculum you could possibly imagine, but that's already been implemented to all Chicago public schools. So this is in addition to that reality.
This is statewide stuff, though.
And this would be statewide for the state of Illinois.
214. This would be in District 211. This would be all across the state of Illinois.
And you might ask, what happens if a teacher, a bold, brave teacher who's
tell me
rational, says no? They get their teaching license taken away.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Dinesh, we've got a new president now. He's been in office for about 5 or 6 days. What are your thoughts? He doesn't seem to be very much in control of the situation, but he has been very vigorous in signing a blizzard of executive orders, all of which seem to me thoroughly destructive. The business about climate change, the executive orders on oil leasing and fracking. Of course, he got rid of the 1776 Commission. So he's doing all the bad stuff we warned people that he would do. And at some point, you've got to ask, isn't this going to have a very bad effect on America? A little part of me wishes that it does, because I think we have to open the eyes of the American people to what moving in a socialist direction means. So, yes, I think we're off to a very bad start. It's what we warned about, and we're about to see the fruits of it.
Well, but Dinesh, we're healing. He's reaching out to the other side and urging everybody to heal. I recall when President Trump was campaigning, Dinesh, as you know, one of the big applause lines was lock her up, lock her up. One of the first things he did was to say, I'm not going to pursue her. Quote, she suffered enough, and he felt he wanted to concentrate on his own agenda. When is Biden going to pick up the phone, Dinesh, and call Schumer and call Pelosi and say, call off the dogs? This is an idiotic trial, and we shouldn't be wasting the American people's time with it.
Well, the very fact that they're pushing ahead with it, I mean, it looks like they may have up to 5 Republican votes, not even necessarily 5 for conviction, 5 just for hearing it. And the other 45 would have thrown it straight out.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
What do we need to know about COVID that we're not hearing? What is your perspective on it right now? Because there's never been anything so confusing and so strange in my lifetime.
Well, Eric, I agree with you. And this is politics and medicine has no place at all. And unfortunately, the information, the freedom of information for patients so they can make their choices is just not out there. And so the very simple solutions that people should know as a public health editorial is prevention is very important that you can do today. Don't wait for the virus. Don't wait to get the positive test. Just start today with prevention. And there's 5 supplements you can take. There's 5 lifestyle changes that you can do for prevention. Unfortunately, it's not told, but you know what? It works. And we started back in March. We had people make sure they elevate their own immune system by 3 key nutrients. And when they increase their vitamin D level,
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined by NBC News' Steve Kornacki. I always ask Steve, like I do Chuck Todd, a sports question to begin. What are you calling on Sunday, Steve?
My head says Kansas City can turn it off and on at will. Tyreek Hill is too much. They have too many weapons. My head says the Chiefs are going to win the game, and they might win it easily. But my heart says you don't bet against Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, and that somehow, some way, he's going to find a way to win the game, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I think I'd lean on my heart on this one over my head a little bit.
Have you done the probability analysis yet?
Well, we just take a look at. I'm hoping to have some numbers that I can. This is a little tease for Friday morning. I've been doing a spot on the Today Show at 9:20 a.m. and we're hoping we can have some new numbers for them. But the one thing I'll say is, look, the point spread on this is 3 right now. The Chiefs are favored by 3, and that's actually come down a little bit over the last week and a half. So I think one thing that does reflect is that the public out there, fans out there, bettors out there, looking at this, there is a lot of respect for Tom Brady still.
No, Steve, I think it also follows that if the Chiefs, in fact, beat the spread, cover the spread, and beat the Buccaneers by a touchdown or more, that will conclusively prove the Browns are the second best team in football. Am I right?
Oh, there it is, the transitive property of sports. I love that. I've used this one many times to take to take my team and claim they're right up there. I think you can go with that. You got
All right, good. Now, as a Jets fan, I asked Geraghty this earlier. I got to ask you. Deshaun Watson for Sam Darnold, a first-rounder this year, a first-rounder next year, and any two defensive players you want. Do you make that deal?
Yeah, I think you do. I would believe in him as a future. I think you've seen what you can get with Darnold, and if I were the Jets, I think you would.
All right, now let's get to politics. Reconciliation is central to the Americans' future right now. Do Americans understand it? Do they care about it?
I think it's one of those things in politics. It's like the filibuster, which we were talking about, I think, the last time I was on. I don't think the word itself means a lot to people, but I think that the debate that springs up around it is going to be one of those things that over the next month certainly captures public attention, and I think it is going to drive our politics, and I think you are going to be. It has the potential here, I think, to set the tone in a big way for public opinion in the Biden administration. Reconciliation itself, I don't think means a lot to people, but I think the debate over this stimulus will.
I agree. I think people are going to pay very close attention to where the money goes and who gets it. By contrast, Steve, and of course, always free to knock me down and think, you're wrong. I don't think there's much interest in impeachment. I think this is a Perry Mason impeachment. You take the Chief Justice away. It's not a current president. There's an argument with some heavyweights on both sides arguing that it's not constitutional. What do you think is the level of interest of the American people in this?
It's the interest level. I think. Let me see what the audiences look like next week when they have the trial. In terms of the basic opinion split on it, I mean, it looks a lot like polling about anything related to Trump did for the last 4 years. It looks a lot like polling did on the first impeachment. There certainly was about 2 or 3 weeks ago a small, I would say mid-single digits increase in folks turning against Trump on this. I don't know if that small increase has receded or not. But I think it becomes a question. I mean, how do you interpret it if 48% of the country is looking at this next week, or 49%, something like that, and says, hey, yes, the Senate should vote to convict him? You could say there's a lot of people out there that don't agree with that. But that's that's a glass half full, glass half empty question, I think, because that could be another way of looking at that is that's an awful high number, for a president who's been out of office for a month.
Will television ratings tell us anything about the level of interest? I'm not talking about the opinion on Trump, but just the level of interest, because I can't think of any story that's more over than a presidency other than Christmas. My wife likes to say there's nothing as over as Christmas, and I think there's nothing as over as a presidency.
I tend to agree. Look, as a general rule, I tend to think when you look at major events, if every network is out there covering it, if you've got live coverage on every network, I think, it's something we all look at. We all look at, okay, what was the audience? How many people were watching that? And what can we compare it to? You compare every year. We talk about the Super Bowl. Every year we take a look the day after and we say, okay, how many watched that? Oh, gee, that was a low-interest Super Bowl. Or, I think this year it might be the case. That was a very high-interest Super Bowl. So no, I think absolutely. I think this is teeing up as one of those things where there's going to be coverage that's kind of across all the different networks, and I'm going to be as curious as anybody to see how many people are actually tuning in for it.
Now, our friend Richard Haas, who's a frequent guest on my show, and I'm sure you see him on Morning Joe all the time, has tweeted out a 9/11 style commission on the events leading to and of January 6th is essential. I don't think I've ever seen Richard be more wrong in terms of what the American people want. I actually think that is the least thing that they want, that they've got that sliced, diced, and understood as a remarkably divisive, horrible, and seditious event. And I think they know why that happened, and I don't think they care for a 9/11 commission. Do you intuit a different point of view?
I don't, but I can't say that's one of those where I've seen good numbers. So I would be curious if you could take a look at what the public's response to that is. I mean, again, like I said, what struck me in the initial batch of polling that we got, and again, this is now 2 weeks old, and 2 weeks can be an eternity, especially when you're changing administrations. What struck me when you initially got the polling on this was that it did seem that there was a small but significant chunk of voters who had changed their minds in some big ways, really about Donald Trump. That's something you just hadn't seen for 4 years. I don't know if that's already receded. Like I said, I think I want to see some polling. I think we'll get probably a batch of it this weekend in advance of the trial. But I want to see if that's receded or if that's still the case. But there was a shift there. Again, we're not talking a 20, 30-point swing. We just haven't had those for the last period of American politics. But 5, 6 points, there was a group there that I think had not been turning on Trump for 4+ years that at least in the initial wake of this did. I'm curious if that's something that persists.
3 more stories. Amazon reported earnings yesterday at the same time they reported Jeff Bezos' retirement. I think this is one of the most brilliant moves I've ever seen in corporate America because it froze analysts. Analysts could not actually deal with, and the morning markets show that they are finally processing how enormous the quarter was. But last night in the late hours trading, nothing moved because they couldn't figure it out. I think Bezos executed a transition that would ordinarily disrupt his stock price, coincident with the best quarter in the company's history, in order to nullify both. What do you think?
Boy, this is one of those, I got to say, like GameStop a week ago, me trying to analyze the stock market has been disastrous for me in terms of the stocks I picked, and so I wouldn't want to hazard a guess on that one, to be honest with you.
All right, that's fine. I follow that today. It's just I love it when analysts freeze up and they don't know what to say. Secondly, Ron DeSantis gave a press conference I've played about 90% of it, on big tech yesterday, denouncing big tech for collecting data and for being advertisers, calling it basically George Orwell would have loved big tech. Is he ahead of the curve, behind the curve, or with Americans' general sense of big tech?
Yeah, I think, well, I look at this in 2 different kind of categories here. In terms of within his own party, and I think he's clearly somebody who has some interest in 2024 potentially. I think within his own party, he's aligning himself with an emerging concern, an emerging animating concern for Republican voters, for voters on the right. I think this is something you've seen a real explosion of interest in among conservatives in the last number of months, all sorts of different things. I was listening a few minutes ago to what he was saying there. I think he alluded to a lot of them. So I think clearly this is something that puts him potentially ahead of the curve when it comes to the movement within his own party. And I think in the context of potentially him being a candidate in 2024, that's very interesting. In terms of what this does outside of the Republican Party, to sort of swing voters, middle of the road voters, it's one of those I don't think we have enough. It's a new enough issue. I don't think we have enough polling evidence on that right now. And frankly, it's one of those that I think the issue itself, it's a relatively new issue. And if you want to talk about the politics of this, how they're going to play out over the next 4 years or so, I think there are a lot of events on the ground that could happen over the next 4 years that can really shape and reshape public opinion on this. So I don't know how this is going to play outside the Republican Party yet, but certainly I look at this in the context of DeSantis making a play for 2024, just on the raw politics of it. It's probably a pretty savvy play.
I agree, and I would encourage everyone out there to read The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Harvard Business School Professor Emeritus Ruboff. She is a leftist. I think she's a neo-Marxist, but boy, it's a scary thing. Last question, Steve Kornacki. I think almost everyone who is on the web has now seen Jimmy Fallon clean your office. And I wonder, do you think your office is a norm? Or is the mean to the left or the right of your office level of disorganization?
God help us all if my office is the norm for people in this country. I don't know if folks saw it, but yeah, he and his team came down at some point a few weeks ago when I was up in the studio, and it was one of those things where I saw the video from it. It's almost like, I guess, you take a look at yourself in a mirror and you suddenly notice things that have been there, but you just have kind of been ignoring. Seeing that video of my office before they cleaned it and realizing what an eyesore it had become, I think I was in need of an intervention.
You're too young to remember Johnny Carson taking the cameras live onto the Don Rickles set after he broke his pencil box on the Today Show, but that's going up there with that in NBC Hall of Fame. Steve Kornacki, great to talk to you. Thank you, Steve. As always, a pleasure. I appreciate your joining me. I love to throw everything at Kornacki. He's like Gallagher, only an analyst as opposed to a politician. Time for me to check the markets, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew and Todd are, of course, where you go to get the very best home financing in America. Now, they're sponsors of the show, so you don't have to trust me. Trust the people who use them. I get emails from them every day about how remarkable Andrew and Todd are. The 10-year Treasury is at 1.13%. Overseas today, Japan was up 1%, Hong Kong up 0.2%. It's green in England, it's green in Germany. Light crude's up to $55 a barrel, suggesting the recovery might be coming. Google and Amazon had blowout earnings. I mean, extraordinary earnings as pandemic advantage companies are doing. People who are disadvantaged by the pandemic are getting crushed. It's a K-shaped recovery. But my gosh, Amazon and Google in early trading today is terrific. Don't get left behind. Go to AndrewandTodd.com right now. Answer a couple of questions or call them. 888-888-1172. Get your house refinanced while you can. Finally, don't forget, ReliefFactor.com. I hold it up every hour at this time and remind you people about to get in your car in the Central Time District or in the Mountain Zone when you're going early. Even some of you early risers in California who have got to make the long haul from Moreno Valley to L.A. You're going to drive from Sacramento to San Francisco. If your back hurts, if your knees bark at you, if you hate that commute, try ReliefFactor.com. $19.95. Get you started. A 3-week trial pack. $19.95. You will swear by it. I carry in Kirkman, Resveratrol, Omega. You're going to love Relief Factor. Now, 1-800-520-1234. I might get one call in, but I've got Josh Kraushaar next. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Correct at any given point in time. These rules and standards are often changed without the knowledge of their users, moving the goalposts on Floridians and others who use these open forums for deplatforms a candidate for elected office in Florida during an election. A company will face a daily fine of $100,000 until the candidate's access to the platform is restored. Again, any Floridian can deplatform any candidate they choose. You simply unsubscribe, and it's a right that I believe belongs with the citizen. You simply unsubscribe, and it's a right that any Floridian can deplatform any candidate they choose. Access to the platform is restored. Again,
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Healthcare, they have the private sector completely run healthcare. They don't trust the private sector enough to allow the private sector to run healthcare. They've been trained to fear the private sector and to embrace government to the point now where a discussion about unraveling government entanglement in healthcare we can't even have anymore.
Well, first of all, Larry, we don't have a complete private market in healthcare in this country, as you know. 50% of our healthcare is in the hands of government through Medicare, the program for our seniors, of which covers 65 million, Medicaid, the program for low-income people, that covers now 70 million Americans, the CHIP program, the Veterans Administration. So we don't have a private market. But the progressive liberals, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the mainstream media, have just brainwashed the American people to say that the private sector cannot provide the kinds of alternatives and different types of plans for people. So people have been completely bamboozled. But it's interesting that, 59% of people polled say they support single payer, a complete government takeover of healthcare, which Bernie Sanders wants.
Right.
But when you ask the people, 160 million of them, which have private insurance in the employer market, if you ask them, well, you're going to have to pay much higher taxes, support goes down to 37%. If you tell them we're going to take away your private coverage and everybody's going to be in a government plan, support goes down to 26%. The problem is people don't understand what it means.
And Sally, the very same people that are complaining about the vaccination rollout are perfectly content to have the government take over everything.
Any Floridian can deplatform any candidate they choose. You simply unsubscribe, and it's a right that I believe belongs with the citizen. Further, if a technology company promotes a candidate for office against another, the value of that free promotion must be recorded as a political campaign contribution.
Welcome back, America. That's Ron DeSantis. I'm Hugh Hewitt. He spent 20 minutes ripping into big tech yesterday. I'm joined now by Hotline Josh on Twitter, Josh Kraushaar of the National Journal. Josh, I don't know if you saw Ron DeSantis spend a half hour just ripping big tech yesterday. Did you catch that?
I saw some of the clips, and it certainly has gone viral. He really has hit some points that conservatives have been talking about for quite a while now.
Now, the critique he made is one made from the left in a book called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff, a Harvard Business School professor emeritus. It's a long-standing critique of the left that big tech is taking surplus information and basically farming individuals for it. Do you see big tech as emerging as the 2022 sleeper issue?
It's a big issue, and both the left and the right hate big tech, but for somewhat different reasons. I actually just bought the book you're talking about, so I'm looking forward to reading it. But the modern right is concerned that tech has too much power in deplatforming or regulating speech on its private platforms, and the Democratic Party and the left, maybe not entirely, but the large majority of Democrats want the platforms to police content. They want the platforms to police hateful and right-wing content. To me, these are private platforms. The biggest argument between left and right is where do you draw the line? I think every platform, even Parler before it got deplatformed, had terms of service. I think the real debate politically is where do you draw the line on those terms of service? Where are the standards? I also think your point I saw on Twitter, you were talking about how all these tech companies are staffed by engineers who have no background in philosophy, political science, world history. I mean, there's sort of a cluelessness about the power of social media from these very CEOs and leaders in the tech world that has really been problematic and is really opening themselves up to vulnerability. And it caused a lot of problems societally as well, as we've seen these last few years.
It's like asking me to talk about hockey. I know a little bit about hockey, but the moment we go beyond 1 minute, people will know I know nothing about hockey. And I think that's big tech talking about politics. When you read the Zuboff book, I'm forewarning you, she's a neo-Marxist, and there's a critique in here of the economics of it, which I do not accept, but the actual factual recounting of their vast troves of data, I think it's going to actually shift the debate from deplatforming to what in the world is the future going to look like for children and grandchildren of adults right now when everything is known about them and they can be nudged? Second question, what do you think is the genuine level in the public in the Perry Mason impeachment? I'm bored to death with it already. I know the insurrection should be tried. I know Trump's not going to be convicted. I just think it's boring. What do you think?
I don't know if it's boring, but I think you're right that it's not getting the type of political oxygen simply because we all know now that there are very unlikely to be enough Republicans, even close to the number of Republicans necessary to convict. And look, a lot of media coverage is dependent on drama and suspense, and there's not a whole lot of suspense. It looks like maybe you'll get 5 Republican senators on conviction, but that's a high number. That's a higher number. And, look, Trump is going to be is not going to be convicted. He'll be impeached twice, and I just don't think there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen in this trial.
Now, the last thing I want to ask you, Larry Sabato put out his first crystal ball map for 2022. He listed exactly one toss-up, meaning a 50-50 Senate is likely to be a 50-50 Senate after the elections, although it's a Republican seat, Pennsylvania, that's a toss-up. He pointed out that maybe Nevada's in play, maybe New Hampshire's in play. We'll see. What do you make of the map?
Yeah, I mean, the way I put it is this is going to be a fun cycle to cover both Senate and House because the fundamentals favor the Republicans for first election as the opposition in a Democratic president's term. The environment now favors the Democrats, I think, just because of the issues with right-wing lawmakers, extreme lawmakers like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and the fact that the Republicans are facing divisions within their own party. So it really does come down to the candidates. I mean, I always say this, especially in Senate races, candidates matter. Getting good mainstream candidates in these big races in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, that's going to make all the difference in these battleground states. So I'm keeping a close eye on the recruitment successes and efforts in all these battlegrounds because that's going to make the difference between a win and a loss.
30 seconds. If you were to offer advice to Kevin McCarthy, mine is throw Marjorie Taylor Greene out of the caucus, keep Liz Cheney, move forward, it'll be over in a week. Keep her in the caucus and fire Liz Cheney. This story goes on for 6 months. What do you think?
If you were advising the Republican Party and they took your advice, they'd be in much better shape because that's obvious politics. You don't want the long-term taint of someone who's going to be a killer on your party. You don't want to have that branding issue. And it's just a lot of issue. Her positions are just so out of the mainstream of the conservative movement. They're nutty positions. So, the fact that it's taken so long for McCarthy to take a stand, it's a problem, and they're going to have to deal with it.
A plane didn't hit the Pentagon. I mean, right there, you lose 90% of Republican voters if they would simply trust their voters to be smart about what is outside the mainstream. Josh Kraushaar, thank you. Follow him on Twitter at Hotline Josh. Follow me tomorrow, America. Thank you, Adam and Ben. Thank you, Harley, and especially Dwayne. I'll talk to you on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.